and welcome to The Black Unconscious,
a mental health podcast about living, coping, and thriving while Black.
I'm Raquel Martin, a PhD candidate in medical and clinical psychology.
And I'm Dr. Justin Hopkins, a licensed clinical psychologist.
This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for a therapeutic relationship with a licensed therapist.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the show. Hey, and welcome to The Black Unconscious. We are your hosts. I am Dr. Justin Hopkins.
And I'm Raquel Martin.
And today is season 2, episode 23. We are doing an Ask Us episode.
We are. It's been a while. We took a little break to regroup and handle our own mental health and chill out a little bit. But we're back.
Yeah, this is our first episode of 2019, huh?
It is. It's our first episode of 2019.
Yeah, so we are so excited to be back. And we've got a ton of questions to throw you all's way. To answer, rather. Some answers to throw you all's way. And, so why don't we just jump right into it? And for context, actually, instead of jumping right into it, it's our second Ask Us episode. We did a brief one.
Why? We're not starting off the year this way. Why do you need to do context for a male episode?
I'm a context kind of guy. Right? We got more questions this time. That's important. And this will be a full Ask Us episode instead of a brief one. So you guys get excited about that.
You do it for 2019. Is the New Year, same you. Let's go.
New Year, same you for show. All right. So start us off, Raquel. What's question number 1?
Okay. What would you two say is the most difficult part of your jobs, respectively?
Wow. Interesting. Want me to go first?
Yeah. Okay. You go first.
I will definitely go first. So, let's see. Well, I think every job has its own occupational hazards, obviously, and has things that you wish were different about the job, but are just not. And so you learn how to deal with them, cope with them, or if you don't, then you change your profession. But for me, I think what is challenging, and I think all therapists deal with it, is that sometimes when you're working with someone and you're getting to know them, the ins and outs of their concerns, you can see potential for them that they really, really struggle to see in themselves because their experience is different, or they just have a hard time even hearing and accepting the things that they say about themselves in therapy. And so it's kind of like feeling like you know a version of them that they don't know at times, because you're able to, because you're removed, and this is part of why therapy works, when you're working with someone who's a professional that you don't know, is that when you start to establish this deep, intimate relationship with another person, and you have a ton of context for why they are the way they are, the experiences that they've had, the inner and outer workings of their mind, you can understand and give grace and empathize with and appreciate and have positive regard for the things that they've done and who they are as a person. Whereas when you're steeped in that, right, when it's your own personal experience, that's really hard to maintain. So as a therapist, being removed from you and removed from your life, even though I have an understanding of you and who you are, I can often see parts of yourself that you're having a hard time holding on to, understanding, empathizing with, giving yourself grace for, forgiving yourself for. There's, and that can be challenging at times, just trying to help someone. Just trying to help someone to get to that place.
Yeah, think about if you can't give recommendations too early. Even if you're okay, this is where we're at, but in 10 sessions, this is where I think we could be, and I already know what that's planning, because everything's based off of conceptualizing the case and the problem and all that, what contributes to it. So you may see that all someone may need to do is this one thing. Mm-hmm. But you can also see that they're not ready to receive that, right? They're not ready to receive their role in the issue, or they're not really to receive this person is toxic, or they're not ready to receive that they need to take a break. And if you give that recommendation too early, swing and a miss, they knocking that shit out. Nah, that's not true, because they're not ready to receive it. And it's also we can't. It's not even recommendations, because that's tasking them to do something. Mm-hmm. If they're not in a place to be ready to do it, or they can't do it, it's not going to happen. And then you can lose rapport because they think you don't get them. Mm-hmm. Yes. And then it's sure. And you're just but I know this is what needs to happen, but you're not ready to get it yet. So it's freak. Okay. because you do know, right? Like you've trained with this, you like working with this person and understanding what's going on with them, looking at the issue or seeing the same issue present itself, and yet you still have to wait until they're ready. And I feel like that's hard to just be like, okay, well, I see that this is the same thing that's happened in 4 different scenarios. You don't see it as the same thing, so we got to work on you being able to point out the triggers and the trends.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're not ready to receive.
Yeah.
Like, this is a way to stop this. Like, what's the way you think there is to stop this? If you don't understand the pattern, and if you think there's not even a pattern, and there normally is, like, there's normally a pattern, then it's just like, well, we're just gonna, and you're just screaming like, oh my God, I thought this was a session that we would have been able to do. It's like I thought we would have been able to do this, but it's like you don't want to rush them.
Because when you have that relationship with your patient, you genuinely care about them and you genuinely try to understand. But part of that understanding, I will say too, right, is knowing where they are and meeting them where they're at and adjusting yourself accordingly so that you can get to know them in a way that feels healing, so on and so forth. But yeah, I would at least for me, I think sometimes that can be kind of challenging. Or I mean, is there anything different for you, Raquel? Because you also work with kids, so there are other dynamics to that.
Yeah. As I like stare off into the distance.
Right. That was a very thoughtful yeah.
It's very it's very difficult because children never want to come in. A lot of times parents bring them in and they're like, fix my child, and they don't think they're going to be involved in therapy. And it's like, congratulations, you're involved in therapy too now, because it's a family thing. I once had my professor say that she used to work with kids for years. She used to work with children for years in therapy, but she couldn't deal with the parents. So now she only works with adults. Because most of the time it's not the children. It is though, because children can be exhausting, but it's like dealing with parents who don't want to participate or aren't adhering to recommendations. So I feel like that's something that's often stated. But for me, I think what was hard in the beginning, which isn't difficult now, is working with individuals who have different values than me. When it comes down to what they want from their child, their opinions on stuff. Like in the beginning, when I first started training, it used to be really difficult for me. And I used to just be like, oh, well, I would do it this way. Or, if you have education as a top value, then you should do it this way. But then it's like, everyone doesn't have that. Like everyone doesn't have the same household values as thinking autonomy should be the most important thing. Like if a family is like, he's 13 and I'm exhausted because it takes a while to make his lunch and he has to have a different lunch every single day. So my suggestion early, just being in master's level program, was tell him to make his own lunch. He's 13. Why doesn't he make his own lunch? But that's not their value, right? She doesn't want to do that. She likes making lunch for him. She doesn't think he needs to do that. Versus my household, it's 13. I mean, let's forget lunch. What did you make for dinner? I just got off of work. So just being understanding of the fact that everyone is not going to have the same values when it comes to parenting or stuff like that, because we all have individual ways that we were brought up. And when you're working with people and you may think certain things worked and certain things didn't work, but just separating myself from I'm not here to impart my values on you. I'm here to learn what your values are and then see how we can make them work better to make your family dynamic work better. Right. I feel like it was something I struggled with more in the beginning, but now it's I don't know. I don't really think most of my patients, everyone's different, but I don't think many people have the same values as me, and it changes nothing. It's how do I help you with what you find important? Yeah. But when I first, in the beginning, master's level, oh yeah, well, tell him to make his own lunch. Why is he making his own lunch? And it's that's not why we're here. I'm not trying to say that. I'm saying help me find more time to do other things. I don't think he needs to be autonomous at 13-year-olds. That's not something that's important to me.
Right.
Or lately, a big thing has been video games with children. And I don't know. I'm not really a big fan of screen time for children at a certain age. And that's something that I think a lot of people who work with children struggle with, because we do see a lot of the research regarding screen time. But if it works for you, it works for you. Yeah. I'll see patients who have video games 4 or 5 hours a day.
I feel like part of what you're talking about is just just honing in on and understanding what is going to work the best for this particular person with their particular values, with their particular goals and desires for their own individual life, and giving people the space to choose things that, even though you may understand things differently with your expertise and knowledge, and even though you may understand things about them and their situation and their family or relationship, so on and so forth, that you think might actually like work a little bit better if they did X, Y, Z. To me, I see my the role is kind of like just, and you were saying this, right? Like helping people to get to a place where they can understand themselves more and make those choices with a level of clarity and confidence, even if that choice is not going to align with the things that I would think would be good for them.
Yeah, like my job is to improve the way your family system works. My job is not to tell you
as a family therapist.
As a clinician, period. Because I think that's hard for a lot of people to separate themselves from the situation and figure out like, this isn't my role.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you will deal with a lot of patients who have views different than you. You might deal with a patient who is like, I don't know, they could be like racist, a bigot, like sexist, like all these things, which can pull a lot out of you.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to ask yourself, what is my role in the room? Like I'm the professional in the room.
And I have actually worked with patients who have verbalized homophobic rhetoric or racist rhetoric, who come from racist families and also believe those things themselves, and so essentially are racist. And so, you know, and I think it's just
are racist.
it's just, I was like, sugar.
Let me just say it. Like, they're racist.
They're racist. Yeah, I mean, and it happens, right? But as a therapist, you are trained to be in touch with your own feelings enough that you can acknowledge that, understand it, put it to the side, and then be able to work with that particular person. And if someone who is racist and homophobic, I personally believe that they have ideas about other people, right? They're putting off something that is heinous and hateful into other people, and there's something about that thing that they're putting into them that they actually possess and experience within themselves, but can't contain it.
Or they're just morons.
That's probably.
I mean, you have to be. I mean, just the level of intellect, like to be racist or homophobic, like the conversation will always hit a ceiling because that's where their intelligence stopped. Like for real, like watching these people on TV, their rhetoric, I'm like, but that doesn't make sense. Yeah. Black on black crime, that's not in the stats. You know, based on the Bible, okay, that's also not, you know, it's just, there's a point where the intellect stops.
Yeah.
So it's just,
yes. No, you're right.
Well,
I think in general, when it comes to like, you have the most intelligent people in the world, right? And some of them are still racist. Right, we know that for sure, and there's something about like around race where all of a sudden they stop thinking, they stop using their brain. It's a thing, but
it's a thing.
Anyway.
We see it on CNN all the time with this fool freaking Cheeto. It's ridiculous. Cheeto, circus peanut looking, like it's just like, I mean, and you know what? That's not even that's not even a good example of an intellectual, able-minded person. Actually, I mean. That man ain't never had the tools.
Well, yeah. Well, we're recording this during the 2019 government shutdown for all the people who will come back and listen to this, and it is rough in DC.
And it'll also apply for the next 2 years.
Yeah,
it's. I mean, like,
nuts.
It could be like we're talking about this on a Sunday in February. It's still like a.
Yeah,
but I would say that is like, I think the best thing about my training was just learning, you know, to take yourself out of the situation, to understand like, this is my job, this is my role. I think it does get exhausting, but it's also, I find that the people who chose this profession, it's not as difficult for them to separate themselves. You know, like it's like you knew that this was the job when you came into it. You knew that this was going to have to be like a thing you had to do. It's not that hard to just be like, even if you, I don't know, what's something that often happens? Corporal punishment. Like you're allowed to beat your children to a certain extent. Like it is like
by law.
You're allowed to. If someone doesn't believe in that as a clinician, you're trying to teach them other methods. But you also like, if they're doing it within reason, if they're doing it right, if they're doing it within the hands of the law, well, like you're gonna say like stop beating your child, it's the worst thing in the world to do. Even if you're avidly against it, you can teach them different techniques, but that's not your role. That's I think it's hard for a lot of people when they think about being a clinician. The first thing they say is like, man, I would love to do that so I can tell people what to do. Oh, me too. When do we get to tell people what to do?
Yeah, we can offer recommendations, and depending on the kind of thing that you, right? But it's not like I'm telling you have to. Like, it really is. The patient's autonomy is always at the center, right?
Yeah, they got to come to it themselves, or else they're never going to get it.
Yeah, I think your example of corporal punishment is a decent one because it's like, we know what the research says about corporal punishment, but
what does the research say again? Just in case people are confused.
It is awful. It does not work.
Your does not work.
Grows up knowing how to be obedient, but often lacking their own sense of independence and autonomy.
You sever your relationship with your child, and don't sit here and say it works for you because some part of it didn't.
It stifles your emotional development, and when that child grows up into an adult, there could be like issues of relating with one another. So there's a lot of decades and decades of research has shown this, and we're talking just specifically not strict discipline, but specifically corporal punishment. That it has a lot of negative outcomes, but of course parents still do it and still hit their children. Now, obviously, if it crosses a certain level of leaving a mark or using an object, those are things that you as clinicians, like, we are legally obligated to report and to follow up on beyond our control. That's like one of the limits of confidentiality, but that is one of those things, one of those areas where that can be tough, right? Where the person still has the freedom to make those choices. Now, hopefully, as they understand the impact of those choices and why they're making that particular choice, because usually the rationale is crazy. Something like, well, that's what happened to me. Well, but does that mean it's
that was
okay?
Tradition. So was slavery.
Yeah,
is that how you want to start off? Like, I said it to one of my professors once, just because like I was sick of the white shit one day, and they're like, well, this is how we normally do it. This is like the tradition in the department. I was like, so is slavery.
Yeah.
Are you saying you're aligned with slavery? And another student was like, Raquel, come. I'm like, I'm not for this shit today. Yeah. You want to make somebody uncomfortable, and they say like this is the way it's been done. Just say that, like, well, slavery was the way it's been done too. Are you for that? Is that where we're at here? Like,
anyway, managing that, and I think that could certainly be a challenging part of the job. Yeah,
and plus also like at a certain point it doesn't work. Right? Like I remember one time my brother was going to be able to choose between like being grounded or beating. He said, oh, I'm going to take the beating. Beating's going to end, and then I could be on a video game in like 10 minutes. Being grounded means my games have been taken away. Like, it's just, when they get to that level, it's just like, I think I'm going to take the beating. Because they know it doesn't work. They know it's temporary. And then they get to go back doing what they were doing. Mm-hmm. You can come up with some better punishments. I don't know. My mom instilled the fear of God in me, and I barely remember. I used to get popped in the mouth a lot, of course, because this mouth has been here for a while. But nah, I don't remember getting beat like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's go on to our next question.
You read the next one.
All right.
I read this one. Oh, and it's longer. Thank goodness.
All right. Oh, this is an interesting one, and there's a couple of questions infused in it. So, my wife and I had a discussion on single women who feel obligated to have sex with men because they went on a date. Is this true?
Hold on, I'm sorry. This is the way you read it.
I'm putting a lot of suspense
You're a good, because that was a good question mark. Right. Like, you did that well. Okay, I'm sorry.
It goes on. Do single women give men sex just to alleviate the pressure? Why can't she tell him no, although that's what he wants because he wined and dined her? What are you all's thoughts? I love the podcast, especially What's Love Got to Do with It?
We love the podcast.
What's Love Got to Do with It? Got a lot of love.
It did. What was that? The relationship series?
Yeah, that was the 3-part relationship series. We'll do another one at some point. But anyway, this guy's question is interesting, right? He's asking, so he's having this conversation with his wife, and he's basically asking her, right, do women actually feel obligated to have sex with men? And if so, like, why do you have that pressure? And Like, what are your thoughts? Like, why is this a thing?
I think it's so interesting that the question is kind of like, is this a real
Yeah,
thing?
I mean, he sounds enlightened. Like, it's just like, what?
Like,
Really?
it was like when he had this conversation, he was like, bruh, women don't feel obligated. Talking to his wife, like, come on. She's like,
I was a little more hopeful. I was wondering, it was like, maybe he's asking the question because he's thinking, like, really? Like, maybe? You're just like, geez.
No,
he's down
well,
here.
okay. I don't mean to put it in that
It's
voice.
funny, but I think we're both projecting
We
our
are.
experience onto this question. We definitely are.
But even in the question, he says, like, even though he wined and dined her, like,
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, you wanna take a first crack at this, or?
yeah, sure. One, yes, I think some women do feel obligated. That doesn't mean they do. That just means they may feel more uncomfortable in the situation.
You mean that doesn't mean they actually go along with it and do
Yeah,
it.
but some people
Yeah.
might. It depends on the person's, like, I don't know, personality and stuff, the way they think this situation will go. Because there's multiple ways the situation can go. You can have a fear of, not even a fear. So fear is one way, but you can just feel obligated just because the person was nice, and even though you don't feel like it. You can also have a fear that, like, they did all this. I made the foolish mistake of letting them drive. Women don't let them drive, but I let them, and they may just, like, leave me on the side of the road or something. You know, like, so there's the fear aspect of it. But I don't think that means everyone does it. But I do think it's a thing. Like, there's always some kind of pressure.
Right, you were kind of getting back to, like, fear of, like, men retaliating if you don't give in.
Yeah,
Like,
even
being
with,
left on
like,
the side of the road.
even just talking to people. Like, I remember being on, I think I mentioned this, like, Carabana, and some dude, like, grabbed me.
Yes.
And I was still being very respectful, because I'm being real, I just didn't want to get punched in the face, because that shit happened. So I'm just like,
Yes.
you know, once again, still married. So you just have a good day. And my friend had to literally pull
Pry his
him.
hands off.
And I wasn't in the wrong, but I still felt the need to be respectful because, you know, I want to get cursed out. So I think there's always that fear. I don't think all men are that way, but I think everyone has had one experience where a man has been that way. So you don't want it to turn out that way.
Yeah.
And then, I think that. I don't think they always give it, but I can see a situation where a woman does.
So that situation that you were in at Carabana, I have never, ever been in a situation like that in my life. Not even close.
You never been grabbed?
I have. I've never.
Women grab
felt
men
like,
too. I've seen it.
Sure. But my experience is typical, right? Like, not feeling threatened by another person of the opposite sex. That's the typical experience. So I think this the person who asked this question, and you know, I'm actually, like, assuming that you are a guy. Because you don't identify, like, who you are, but it seems like you're a guy. But, like,
your experience is typical. Mine is
my
too, though.
Yes, exactly. But what I guess what I'm saying is just, like, I think it's interesting. Like, this person is, like, really asking, like, is this really a thing? It's like,
it's definitely a thing.
Yeah, it is. You haven't experienced it because, you know, you're probably a dude. Like, so your experience as a guy is different from that as a woman. And so to answer the question, yes, obviously women do end up in these situations. And having worked with people who have been sexually assaulted, people who have been raped, people who have just experienced daily catcalling, and the daily like little implicit ways that misogyny and patriarchy are reinforced all of the time, whether that be men interrupting them in meetings, men's talking over them.
The hand raise. Have you heard you know what I mean by the hand raise?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, have you ever been talking and the dude just put his hand up, like, and just start and like finish what we're gonna say? Like, nah.
Wow.
No?
I've never had that, but that sounds disrespectful as hell.
Like,
like I was starting to get upset. Like, I was just like, damn, because you just gonna put your hand up.
Yeah, the hand raise, like, just putting the hands up, like, I have a point.
But all
like,
of those things,
God.
right? All of those things on a daily basis, just like white supremacy tells, like, black folks that you are inferior on a daily basis in these small little ways, small little messages, and then even on larger ways, right? So too does male privilege and patriarchy and misogyny tell women that you don't really matter and you owe people things.
Or you just don't matter as much.
And you don't matter as much. Right. And so what that also communicates is how you feel doesn't matter as much. What you want doesn't matter as much. It is literally imbued self-questioning. That's what oppression does. It brainwashes you to question your own experience because you wonder why this is happening to me. It must be at least part me because there are other groups of people that don't have this kind of experience. So with that built-in self-questioning, I would say that, yeah, there are some women that end up questioning themselves so much.
Like, am I being approved? Like, he did take me to dinner. Like,
right.
I did get a drink and an appetizer. Yep. And we got dessert. We've been hanging out for hours. And he is a nice guy.
Shouldn't I?
And
really the only
answer is no. You don't have to do a damn thing you don't want to do.
Right.
Like,
and
period.
Really the only question there that one needs to ask himself is, do I want to?
Yeah.
What do I want to do? And it's so hard, I think, for some women in those situations to be able to answer that question removed from the pressure of the moment, the expectations of society or the gentleman, and removed from the fear of retaliation because that person might feel like they are owed something.
Yeah, and that shit is scary too. Like, the arm grab thing is weird, but it's like, in the context, I was like, I mean, at least it wasn't an ass grab. I ain't have an ass grab in a minute, or at least I didn't get called a bitch. Like, it's even justifying, justifying, like,
yeah.
I mean, at least dude ain't grab my ass. We cool. At least I got to walk away, because the fear is real. Like, there's multiple things. Situations escalate so quickly, and like, I think it depends on how you were reared or like what you're used to being in. But I'm very hypervigilant when it comes to that kind of stuff. It's been taking a bus and a train since I was younger, been catcalled since I was younger. I remember seeing this one like Facebook post, like, when did you notice men looking at you a different way, like, and commenting on like curves and stuff like that. Yeah. And one chick was like 12.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, that sounds about right, which sounds like mad young for people, but it's not. So you're used to like, so like everyone talks about how fast I walk. I walk fast because like got my headphones in, not trying to be catcalled, just trying to get the bus to go to work.
Yeah.
And I done got called like a bitch 4 times, something like that. Mm-hmm. But I walk really fast because I'm used to taking public transportation. There's so many different engagements you have. Mm-hmm. So there's that. But then there's also the fear that like, bottom line, like, men can, if they can kick my ass, like, period. Like, if they act aggressively, and I'm not saying everyone does, but that's a concern. Right. Like, I always walk at night with keys in my hand, like with my key up. So like, if I have to punch somebody, I have to. I have a taser. I have mace. I just gave my mom mace. I was surprised she didn't have it. Like, walking with force, not looking down, making eye contact, but not too much eye contact, not getting on the train. It's only me on the train. So if just a dude comes in, I'm not getting it. Like, there's all these things that really should be in your mind. Even in dating, I think every female is like, all right, I'm going on a date with this person. I'm meeting them at this place. This is their, I took an Uber. Even when I take an Uber, I confirm the car. They got this track your progress. I send the progress because there's that whole like assault thing happening on Uber. Like, you have to be so vigilant.
Yeah.
And be mindful that like.
And that's a level of vigilance and a level of thoughtfulness. That's a degree of cognitive burden that I will not experience around my gender ever as a man.
Until you have a daughter.
Until I have a daughter.
That's why I think, you ever think about like how people, I don't know, a lot of individuals, like men, like may want sons or like don't want daughters in the beginning. And I think it's because there's that fear that like, do you know how much shit?
Well, yeah, like I think most men do unconsciously know to some degree that there is a male privilege that allows men to act in ways that are completely deplorable.
And it's also limited though, because to balance it off, you're a black man. So I mean, like,
right.
So there's male privilege. Right. My hands are up high, and then there's black male privilege. So I lowered my hand. It's not the same. So I want to be mindful of that.
And I think also, I mean, the other thing that comes with that too is that with that maleness, you are also feared by white people.
Yeah,
right?
man.
Which is a whole nother thing. But I want to get back to
y'all always have the empty seats on the train, on the plane.
Always. I mean, that's like kind of a perk.
It is a perk. Oh my God.
But
I never have an empty seat next to me. People always sit next to my ass.
But I do want to answer like this portion of his question because this feels really important. Like, he's saying like, why can't she tell him no? Although that's what he wants because he wined and dined her. In other words, like, if she doesn't want to do it, why can't she just say no, right? And it gets back to exactly what we were talking about. Like, when you are oppressed, right, your voice, the more you are oppressed, and to me, I do believe like black women of color are the I don't believe in struggle Olympics. I don't really believe in comparing like issues or saying one is greater than the other.
But if you had to, if you did believe in it,
black women deal with a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Women in general deal with a lot. Black women deal with a lot. And so what comes with dealing with that is a level of like self-questioning. You're like, is it even okay for me to say no? If I've been assaulted, abused, raped before, that's someone directly telling me, directly speaking to my psyche, you don't matter worth a damn. And so there can be a level of self-questioning about like, is it even okay for me to turn this down? Is it even okay for me to have a feeling of uncomfort? Should I just forfeit over who I am because I'm told this is what I'm supposed to do because society has oppressed me over and over and over and over and over again? Like I can't even it becomes harder to access your own voice. Along with that is like what you were saying, like what if he retaliates? Right? People who say like, why doesn't the partner who's being domestically abused just leave? Does not understand how domestic violence brainwashes and influences people's experience of themselves.
And doesn't acknowledge the love in that relationship too. Like it wasn't always, no matter what, it wasn't always that bad. As someone who's worked with people who have been in abuse, it wasn't always that bad.
Right.
Do you think if you slapped me around on the first date, I would have came to the second date? No.
Right. Or I mean, it could be right. They have their own distorted experience of love because they aren't able to love themselves for whatever reason. Because there have been other experiences that have told them that they're not good enough. Like invariably in those situations, there's almost always some experience of trauma that makes it hard for someone to access their own voice. So what I would say to you, why can't she say no? If you're asking about women who feel uncomfortable about saying no, one, there's the fear of retaliation because misogyny and patriarchy is a thing. Two, in those situations, if you've experienced abuse before, it can be just harder to actually feel comfortable enough in yourself to voice what you actually feel because there's self-questioning there. And then three, I think because we have male privilege, what you do with privilege, if you believe in equality, it's about using your privilege to kind of pave the way for other people who don't have privilege to be on the equal playing field for you. So as men, I think it's important for us to be mindful of, in heterosexual relationships, the woman's level of comfort and to inquire about it. Be curious of it because your inquiry and your curiosity tells to them in no uncertain terms that it's actually important what you feel. Yeah. That your comfort level is actually valuable. And that message is actually antithetical to what society tells women. So actually, I think being a man with privilege, and yes, black men do have male privilege, especially
not as much
in heterosexual relationships, not as much, but especially in heterosexual
Bottom line,
relationships.
I don't want that to get mixed up. Like
sure. And no men are not all bad, and I hate people who kind of swing to that. But because we have the male privilege, I think it's upon us to be inquisitive and be curious and be interested in our partner's level of comfort, rather than always putting the onus on them to come out and say what they do and do not want in situations where they could be uncomfortable doing so.
No matter what they were wearing, no matter how long y'all hung out, no matter how much y'all were making out, no matter how much y'all were groping, no matter what, bottom line, if there's any confusion, assault starts where consent ends. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It does not matter. It doesn't matter if like, oh, you was into it before and then now I'm not. So, right. You know?
Yeah, Amanda Seales had this thing on her Instagram. She said,
you love her.
She's amazing. I love Amanda Seales. If Amanda Seales like ever listened to my podcast, I'd probably just like die. She said, what was it? She said, "Oh, like it does like nothing matters. Like nothing matters if once there's a no, there's a no. It doesn't matter if the person's butt naked. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of sex. If they say no on stroke 7, stroke 8, stroke 9, that's assault. Yep. Like you have to stop. Like they said no. Like so. Anyway." We're kind of like going off, but
we always do. It's a new year, but like that's not going to change,
new year,
guys.
Same us.
This isn't new. Like,
all right, you want to go on to question 3?
I can't change my whole personality stuff. Okay, Is it possible to have a psychiatrist, psychologist, mental health clinician, etc., that also suffer from mental health issues such as depression, bipolar disorder, PTSD, etc.? How does the dynamic work if it's possible? I ask because I start all my sessions by asking, how are you, to my therapist. I don't want to cause more pain and if my therapist is not okay, I don't mind rescheduling. I don't need details, but it's important to know that I am coming to a healthy space. Healthy doesn't mean perfect, but if my therapist has bipolar disorder, for instance, I would like to understand how that works in a therapeutic process.
There's like so much to unpack here.
Okay. First question, is it possible to have mental health clinician with a mental health issue?
Is it possible? Of course, because all humans are humans. Yes.
Yep. Mental health issues are incredibly prevalent. Great.
Yes.
So that's one. How does that dynamic work if it's possible?
Now let's go on to like read the other context that follows, and because there's a reason why this person is asking that, right?
Yeah, but I'm gonna summarize it. I'm not gonna read the whole thing.
Okay. No. Well, I was just gonna read that one sentence after. It just says, "I ask because I start all my sessions by asking how you are to my therapist," and then there's concern about causing the therapist pain.
Yes.
Right. So two things stick out to me about how this question is phrased.
I appreciate you being considerate of your therapist's concerns. You clearly have a good rapport. So one, that's great.
Which is nice of you.
Yeah.
Which is nice of you. Like, generosity is a good thing on the, like, generally, right? I also believe like too much of a good thing is like not great. Like too much of anything is not great. All things in moderation. That even goes with human qualities. But I will say, like, I think here, to me, there's a concern that you're going to hurt people by taking up space. Like, you come to your therapist to talk about yourself and to unload and to get into the nitty-gritty details of why life has been challenging for you in one facet or another. I think it's interesting to me that at the front of it, there is a concern that doing so will burden the therapist. Because that's our job. Our job is to be there and to listen and to kind of help and to take it on. And so I would just be like, I would be curious about like why that is the initial concern, that actually talking about your issues and getting help from someone whose job is to help you and to listen to those issues would be so burdening and overwhelming for them or cause them pain.
Yeah, and I can guess honestly with this person that this is something that lends not only to your relationship with your clinician. Just because like, you know, if I have a patient who's like,
yeah, exactly.
I want to make sure I'm not burdening you. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't even talk about you burdening me. I'm like, are there any other relationships where you feel like you feel like you're burdening others?
Exactly. There you go.
Because that's what it seems. That's the first thing I go like, that might be something similar. But I will say, we always say a relationship with the mental health clinician is like none other, right?
Yes.
I am here for you.
Yep.
So if I'm having a difficult day or a bad day or something like that, that's not going to affect my session, and that's not something you should know about. And if it is, I mean, we would probably have to reschedule the session because I would have canceled for the day. Like, one of the things that happens that's very prevalent in our training as clinicians is being mindful of our own shit. Like, we have to do a lot of self-reflection. We have to be knowledgeable of all the chips on our shoulders, like as much as we can, so it doesn't interfere with sessions. We have to understand that we're in a position where we are talking to people about things that they have never talked to the closest people in their lives about. So we can't, kind of like what I said with the first question, like, understand your role in the room. So I would say, don't be concerned about me. Cause that's not your job in that session. I will say, like, I also think this is something that you're probably working on in therapy as well, because this is a difficult thing for a lot of people, but, my role is to be here for you. If I'm having a good day or a bad day, the response is going to be, I'm having a cool day. I don't want to bring that much stuff into the room. That's why most people don't do self-disclosure. That's why, like, even with you, Justin, like, most of the time with sessions, like, you're not doing that much self-disclosure because that takes away from your patient, right?
Yeah,
like, it's not their job to know that much about you.
And to be clear, like, and I've answered this question before in the podcast, though, but I'm careful of how much I self-disclose because I do have patients that I work with for long periods of time. I'm talking about weekly or twice weekly sessions for years. And it's helpful for them to continue to doing the work of understanding themselves when they know less about me. And so that's often why I do I don't self-disclose as much. And it kind of gets at this exact question, right? And Raquel, I think you hit it right on the head.
Yeah, because
right?
then the attention is on you. Oh, what is your favorite book? Oh, this is not about me.
Yeah.
Like, we're not talking about this. You don't need to know what neighborhood I came from. Like, that has nothing to do with this. Yeah. So,
but of course, it'll influence whether you, consciously or unconsciously, it'll influence like how you feel in the room or thoughts that you might have about how your therapist, it does kind of, at times, I think it can clutter things. And I do also think there are forms of self-disclosure that are benign and like not going to do anything, but not all of it is. Anyway, sorry. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, I don't even, I think I would hope that most mental health clinicians are mindful enough that if they can't be fully present in the room, or they don't feel like they can be present because of mental health or physical health, that they just call out. Like, sick days are sick days for a reason.
Yeah.
I'm sure your patient would understand you calling out for a day after like a difficult breakup or when you're grieving, other than being less receptive to you being in session and randomly crying in the middle of a session. Like, yeah, you're human, but you should also be human enough to know that today was not the day to be here. Like, today was not the day to work with me during this session.
Yeah.
It's like my thing with servers. Like, if I have a server at a restaurant, I don't need to know you having a bad day. I should not know that. And it really bothers me because I used to be a server. So it's like, oh, you seem like you're having a bad day. How can you tell? Because you're pissed. I don't need to know that. That's not my role. So like, if I'm working with the patient, it's definitely possible to be dealing with mental health struggles. But like, our trainings, we're trained, like, we're humans. We're meant to be humans in the room, but we're also trained professionals. Like, our training is so existent, so consistent.
What do you really want to say, Raquel? You're an internship. Like, I know how that is.
Much.
What if like, you can let it out?
It's not like, this is not an easy path, guys. Yeah. Life ain't been no crystal stair. It's rough. Okay. Yeah. Like,
part of what you're also saying too is like, and this goes to the other part of your concern about your therapist having mental health issues, but as a therapist, you have to understand yourself enough to know when you start and end and when the other person starts and ends.
Yeah, you got to do a lot of reflection.
You got to do a lot of your own self-work and be understanding of yourself enough to know that, like, what's your stuff and what's the patient's stuff, so that you're not projecting things onto the patient, so that you can be so that you can be present with your patient and help and really actually get to help them to understand themselves.
And their problems, not a problem that you might be like, you don't want to transfer your issues onto them.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. And also we got to take care of ourselves, right? We have to make sure that we are mentally sound. So I said to say, like, going back to the first part of the question, like, can your therapist have like depression or bipolar or PTSD? Like, yes, it's possible. Like, yes, therapists do are human and go through life. And some therapists who have endured that and healed from it kind of have an intimate knowledge of how to work through some of that, which can be useful for the person seeing them.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't want you to think of mental health, and this is something that happens in like media. Mental health is not something like a difficulty or a disorder. It's not something that takes you out of the running for life. It doesn't. It's not something that takes you out of the running for working. It's not something that can just take you. It can't just like take you out so that you can't function in society. You work with it, you see a clinician, and you do like your job. You do what you're doing. Like, right? Like, if I have a patient who's suffering from depression, they didn't quit their job. Like, they're still going to work. We're just helping them function with it. If you had like, any kind of disorder, like, it doesn't take you out of the running. If anything, it can help you be more empathic and have more understanding. Like, for example, like one of the biggest therapeutic treatment orientations is dialectical behavior therapy, right?
Yes,
it was created by Dr. Marsha Linehan.
Yep.
She struggled with borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
And like the biggest issue she had with these treatments, and when she was working, she was like, and she's a psychologist, it's like, these treatments are not working for individuals like who have these struggles like me.
Yeah.
This behavior, like this technique, dialectical behavioral therapy, works.
Yeah.
Period. And she struggled with what she was going through, but because of that, she understood stuff that the way that she thought when it came to the mental health issues.
So many clinicians fail to understand about borderline personality disorder. She understood so intimately
because she dealt with it, right?
And she now designed one of the premier treatments for BPD.
And it also transfers over because I found that it works a lot with with patients that have struggling with like impulsive behaviors and stuff like that. Like, and this is someone who struggled with that, but they still were able to do their job effectively and come up with an amazing treatment. Like she's basically a goddess in the psych world at this point. Like, so it doesn't take you out. You can have someone who works on that, and just being mindful. I would hope your clinician would be mindful of that before they work with you, so that they're not, transferring their issues onto you. But if you do feel uncomfortable, if this is also a question because you feel like something's going on with your clinician because you've noticed a difference in the recommendations or a difference in their orientation and stuff like that, you can bring it up, but you can also transfer therapists if you think that that's the issue. But I also don't like, my biggest thing I want you to come back with is like, don't therapists, they work with you, you have a great position, but they're not your friend. So you don't have to hug them and make sure that they're okay. I think it's great that you check in with them, but if they're very well trained, they're good. If they felt that they couldn't be there, then I would hope that they would check out and not be there.
Yeah. I feel like you gave that justice, especially like your point about like if you are feeling uncomfortable or you think your therapist is not doing enough to take care of themselves for whatever reason, that's a conversation you have with them. Or if you feel like it's really impacting the work, then you decide that you may need to work with someone who has those things under control. Yeah,
especially if you can tell if it's coming into session. Yeah, it's starting to spill over.
I would say that you shouldn't know, right? Like if you have some sort of like suspicion about it, then I would talk to a therapist about it. But if they were dealing with something, I would say that you shouldn't know or be able to tell. And if you do, then that's pause for concern.
All right.
It's reason for pause, rather.
Reason for pause. All right, your next one.
All right. This is a really good one, and I think a lot of people might take interest in this because we all struggle with a little self-doubt at some point or another. So the question is, how long does it usually take to break free of the cycle of self-doubt and insecurity?
Forever. That's my Cardi voice. No, it's not forever, but I don't think it's like I think it's a journey. I don't think it's a destination.
Yeah, it takes time.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a process.
Especially given you don't know, especially depending on what it's rooted in. Like it's self-doubt rooted in, I don't know, past relationships and insecurities with that. Is it rooted in like imposter syndrome and feeling like you don't belong in a certain like career path that you're in or the certain place that you're in? Because acknowledging that that's the issue is the first step. It takes a while to get to that. Getting help with it, appropriate help with it. It takes a while to do that. Processing the contributing factors or acknowledging them. It takes a while to do that. It definitely takes a while to acknowledge that at some point you have to acknowledge your role in the self-doubt and insecurity.
Perpetuating it. Sure.
Yeah. So once you get to the acknowledgement portion, there's also the, I guess, like behavior change aspect. Like it's one thing to acknowledge it, but then how do you want to manage it? How do you want to change it? That takes a while. It's not like you're going to add like one accommodation and it's going to work out perfectly. It's going to take a minute for that to apply. And then there's the maintenance part of it, right? Like, all right, you acknowledge the issue. You have some behavior change. You're doing this. How do I maintain this progress? How do I not keep slipping back? How do I understand the difference between a lapse and a relapse? Right? Like, I think if you were thinking in terms of like a line, like 180 degree angle, some people think of a lapse is like, all right, instead of being at 180 degrees, I'm at 170. A relapse is like, all right, now I'm at a 5 degree angle. So it's the basic textbook. I'm on a diet. I had a burger. I might as well have an ice cream, cheese fries, all that. And it's like, well, you don't need to do all that. You had a burger. Keep it moving. Yeah. There's no need to completely regress. Right. I think that's something that also has to be understood when it comes to breaking free of cycles. There's a difference between a lapse and a relapse. And no matter what, you can come back from both. Yes. But you got to acknowledge the issue. You got to see how you're going to change the issue. And you got to maintain that change. And there's going to be some step backs. And that's cool. But you got to see what it's rooted in. Absolutely. So I say it takes a while. I think there's plenty of stuff that I still deal with. Period. And not acknowledging the issues and working with it every single day is the way it works. Nothing works like work. Period. And therapy and life and everything.
Beautiful. Mic drop.
Mic drop.
I guess this is kind of timely that we're answering this question. A few days ago, 3 days ago.
What question?
Well, the question about self-doubt.
I
had posted on our Instagram page. Stop and ask yourself, is the self-doubt I have mine or someone else's?
Right.
Often self-doubt Yeah, I mean, often self doubt and insecurity is just rooted in other people's anxieties that have been projected into us and then manifest as our own. You know,
Because there's such a big voice.
yeah, I even I'm gonna reference Jay-Z. Like there was this, and I don't remember where it was. Oh man, like I wish I remembered where this was. But he was doing this interview, and he was talking to, and where you could find this. But this interview, he was talking to somebody, and he was saying the way that he ended up separating himself from other people in his contemporaries, like other people in the rap game, is that he had to realize that a lot of the people in his circle were saying things to him about like, well, why don't you think about this? Or like, are you sure you want to do that? Or don't you think this could possibly happen wrong? Or, hey, you need to get this together first. And a lot of that, the way that he overcame that is by understanding that those are the fears that they would have if they were in my position. Those are not my fears.
Yeah.
They were not mine until I heard what they said. They came from someone else, right? It's a very common psychological concept that the self-talk that we have in our heads, whether conscious or unconscious, very much mimics some of the things that we heard people earlier in life say, whether that be a mother, father, sibling, cousin, uncle, friend, teacher, whatever the case may be. A lot of those voices, the points that they make, can at times sound very similar to the people in our lives from before. So we have to be careful not to own some of the thoughts and criticisms that were not originally ours.
Yeah, and you know what? It could also be that individuals are perplexed with how you got to this level, right? Like how you get to level 10. I only got to get to level 5. just
what you mean?
Because I'm
like
because you've surpassed them and that they couldn't possibly fathom or they weren't able to do it. So their questioning and their constant things are because they don't get how you got to do it.
Sure.
I also think sometimes people are like dealing with a lot of shit and they're sad and miserable and they may perpetuate that onto you. And you may think that their responses are about you, but really it's just about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why, that's the one thing, that's the thing about being like a mental health professional when I'm like the exhausting thing is the fact that you can't really, like you can't get mad at people, man. It's just like, cause it's just like.
You're so understanding.
Yeah, man. My friend told me this one situation where the person was being a complete ass. And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, they're awful, but it could also be that she's just going through a difficult time. She's just a little miserable right now. And it's just like, even though this person was totally in the wrong, I'm like, a lot of times people, their personalities change when they're going through something difficult. So maybe she just wasn't in a place to be there for you.
Yeah.
Like, nobody can just be a jerk.
Yeah.
No one's just a jerk, right? Except for racist people. I ain't got no problem separating that. But like, no one's just a jerk. It's just like, well, they seem like they're going through something. Anger manifests. It could be, is he feeling fearful, guilty? What's the anger iceberg? What's under the surface? Like, it's never.
Yeah. But it's true, right?
And it's growth, right? Like, I should be a human being.
Humans are incredibly complex.
Yeah.
I will say, I think also what can help with self-doubt, again, like Raquel, like you said, like in the beginning, it's just that it's a journey, not a destination, right? It's something you have to constantly work on over and over and over again.
Yeah, I worry. I always struggle with that in like our profession with like one of my like chips on my shoulder is I always have this fear, and I know it's crazy, that someone's going to think I'm stupid. So like, and maybe it's just because like we're in a high position, but like I always have this necessity to have like multiple resources or defend something or something like that, because I don't want anyone to say that like I can't back up what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like I don't want any misconception about being dumb. And like honestly, when I went through a process and thought about this, it's just because a lot of times I feel like there weren't many expectations for certain people, or like me as a black person, like as female. So like exceeding those expectations, it's always just like, oh well, you already went far enough. You're good. Like this is pretty. So like I never want anyone to just be like, I can't back up what I'm saying, because as black people, we're questioned a lot.
As black people. Like,
are you supposed to be in this position? Oh, are you my doctor? Do you need help with that? No. So I always want to be able to back something up. And and sometimes it can be defensive, because I kind of think, are you questioning me? Like it's difficult. Sure. Like, is this like you just have a question, or sometimes is this like you got a question for the little black girl? Like my friend told me recently, she just did this amazing interview, and the person that she was interviewing with, this white guy, said, you carried yourself very well through this process.
Excuse me?
And she was like, she said, what? what do you mean I carried myself well?
Are you surprised by that?
Like at a, and she is a professional, like, and this was like in finance. She was just like, I carried myself well. I said, well, did you say, well, gee, sub boss, I saved the slang for my friends. Like, she was just so put off by that.
Yeah,
like,
of
he's
course.
just, because it's just like, there's just a questioning in that. There's like
yes.
Why are you proud of the fact that I can carry myself well as a degree carrying professional who's been in this field for years?
And this is how like oppression and racism and other isms
and anger and our anger. This is where our anger stems from.
Yes. And also, if it goes the other direction, right? If it's not anger, then it's self-questioning.
Yeah, that's right? That's what I get with the smart thing.
That's where it starts, because it puts this doubt in you. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm so surprised that how could you, right? Possibly and have done that. But I think one of the keys to breaking free of the cycle of self-doubt is actually thinking through why it is you did the thing that you did in the first place, right?
Okay.
So for Raquel, for example, like you're talking about like being defensive sometimes when things like this happen, that where there's a consideration there, like, is this because I am Black? Are they doing this because I'm Black? Are they responding to me in this particular way because I'm young and I'm Black? Right?
Yeah.
Why are you having that kind of question? Right?
Yeah.
Because you could go in a couple of different directions. It could be like, well, I shouldn't be thinking of this. Like, why am I thinking of this? Yada, yada, yada. But there's a reason why you consider that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The reason is because I'm sure there have been plenty of times.
There have been plenty of times. Where I've been questioned and it didn't make any sense.
And that's not something to doubt. There have factually been many times when things like this have happened. And so now I'm considering that as an option, that this could be an explanation, like the color of my skin could be an explanation for why you're responding to me this way. And that is sound. That gives reason. That makes sense. And I'm only saying this because, like, this is something that every Black person struggles with. I struggle with it. You struggle with it. Every Black person who is trying to do something positive with their life, like you enter these spaces where sometimes people say things like what was said to your friend, like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that you actually did something decent as a human. How could you possibly be professional?
Right? And I was like, did he not see your resume? Like, you've been rocking shit for years. Like,
and I do think the appropriate response in those situations are rage, anger, discontent.
But we can't do that.
No, because then it perpetuates more of it.
Yeah, right? And then I also have to, normally what happens is I'll respond, I'll take a step back and process it later. But what I'm not about to do is sit here and be the angry Black woman anyway in this situation. And it's also difficult because we are in a position, the ultimate, like, question everything position when it comes to research and clinical work and academic work. Like, questions get asked all the time. Is this a question that gets asked because we want to make sure that you have an answer, so that if it gets asked again in the future, you have an answer? Or is it something that I'm just questioning you as like you're do you know what you're talking about? And we question everything. Like, that's what we do. It's like, PhD, come on.
But I do really think, like, if you take a step back from yourself for a moment, because that self-doubt also says that, like, it's your fault. Like, you're the reason why this isn't good enough. That's the insecurity part of the self-doubt. It's just like, I'm not good enough, right? But if you take a step back and really look at the facts, like, really take yourself out of it, consider that there's something other than you, just for a moment, that is causing the situation to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And look at the larger context. Like, maybe there's a part of this was me, but think about why it is that you do what you do, who you are in totality. Some of the things, we all do things that are messed up, that are wrong, that we wish we could take back. We all have inadequacies. We all have limitations. We all have things that we'd like to work on. We all have flaws. But on the whole, is that who I am? Is that who I will always be? Is that all there is to me? Isn't there more to this? So I really think when it comes to self-doubt, breaking that cycle is about always revisiting the facts, the larger picture about who you are as a person and your value as a human. And thinking about thinking about more of, like, this could be me, but also, why did I do the thing that I do? Why am I the way that I am? Why did I make this particular decision? And see if you can come up with an actual answer to explain it, right? And and that's a process that has to happen over and over and over and over again. So it takes time. And I can't put a timeline on it, but it definitely takes time.
It does. And try not to flip too many tables, because although I can't have too many responses where I'm like, why are you asking me that? I've had at least one. Like,
yeah.
Just because I just wasn't at a place to take a minute, take a step back.
I mean, it
There's
happens.
growth everywhere.
Yeah, it does happen.
It's also good to just know, like, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. I don't like going into meetings not knowing what I'm talking about, or not knowing citations, or not knowing citations to the citations. But that's just the way our field is. Like, I'm not going to go in somewhere looking like Boo Boo the Fool.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's a bigger pressure on me. So there's actually been a driving force for things. To just be like, I do know that citation. I also know there was a more recent one that said this, which was like the antithesis of what this said. So
yeah.
I'm gonna go with this.
Yeah. So also preparing, right, and like doing the work to the degree that you feel like you can is a part of tackling like self-doubt as well.
Yeah, I didn't get to this PhD by not knowing what the freak I was talking about.
Right.
Like, I mean,
and those are the facts,
right? 2 masters, PhD,
that is the larger
presentations,
right.
published.
But it happens, right? Like, and I do feel like even when you get to a position where you do not like. I don't think it's healthy to have absolutely no self-questioning mechanism, right? Like, that's what narcissism is. Like, they do their self-questioning on an unconscious level and defend against it with like all sorts of like vitriol. But
I've seen that as like a privilege I've seen some people have. Just they're just like
so confident.
So no, it's not even confident, because not questioning yourself doesn't make you less confident. It just means that like, you're really just not thinking, you're not considerate of other things. So when I think of it, I think of like not being considerate of other options or stuff like that. Well, this is the way it is. This problem doesn't affect me, so I don't need to know anything about this problem.
Well, that's how white privilege actually hurts white people, because they have such a psychological advantage in the level of affirmation that they have globally, right, from society.
You've always been told that you matter.
Yeah. There's such a level, there can be such a level of confidence that you don't stop to think like, oh, actually, there are facts beyond my awareness. Like, for example, that there are other people who have experiences that are actually different from me, worldviews that are really different from me, that are actually just as valid and factual as mine.
Yeah.
And
that hurts us, because there are people like that in power.
It hurts us, and I think it also hurts them, because then they don't learn things, or then you end up being very closed-minded. And when you have no self-questioning mechanism, your ego can become very, very fragile, because then you just feel like everything you say has to be right, has to be grounded, and if there's any inkling that it's not, it kind of like falls apart, or you get really, really defensive. There's a lot of anger and hurt in that. So I think we did that question justice for now.
Yeah. Is this my turn to read?
Yeah, I think so, right?
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so this will be
last
our last
question,
one.
guys.
Last one.
How do you empathize with tone deaf, unaware, and problematic classmates and colleagues in this work, specifically therapy and the helping professions? I am offended by the incompetence and half-assery. I will be using half-assery, so thank you for that.
Noted.
This work is not a hobby to me, but my my unwillingness to accommodate the Sue Anns in my space has labeled me as tough on the team. My therapist is white. That's for another segment. And I am not sure she understands my point of view here. Also, for Raquel, what are some of the ways you've learned to empathize and engage with parents of your clients? Sue Anns, half-assery. So many great words in this one.
Damn.
All right, you start, because I feel like I have actually experienced this problem.
Yeah. I feel like this
everyone has.
Yeah. I feel like this is especially fresh for you. You've mentioned some experiences.
Oh my God, it never ends, man.
Yeah, but I guess I'll say it's hard. Like kind of what you're questioning is part of what you're asking is, how do I empathize with
these fools?
Yeah, with like people who are, because I'm like reading through some of the language here. It's right. These are people who don't get that there are experiences that people have, and when you don't get it, you are tone deaf. You reinforce those painful experiences. You cause more trauma, and these are people that are going to be in positions of power.
And in therapy, and these are the people who's supposed to know. It goes right back from like, and honestly, transition really good from like what you just said about not thinking about other
not
people.
being able to think about themselves, right? Not being able to, like, how do you empathize with that? To be honest, like I feel like like in that particular situation, it sounds like you're going through learning how to do. You said your classmates or your colleagues, you're learning how to do this work as a helping professional yourself, right? And so you're in being surrounded by people who don't get cultural difference or are tone deaf to certain issues and perpetuate problematic behavior. I think it can be hard to kind of hold on to yourself. People are calling you tough. There's a reason why you're tough. Like I would focus less on being empathic because it's not your job to help every single classmate. It can be terrifying that these people are going to go on to be in positions of power in terms of helping others or positions of authority to be present for people who are coming to them with their problems. But for you in particular, I would say that it's really important for you, with people trying to label you, people trying to tear you down, to kind of be just sure within yourself about like what your experience is and why you're having the reaction that you're having. Why is it that you are tough, if that's a word that you want to claim? Because honestly, you don't have to. That's up to you.
And there's also nothing wrong with being tough.
Right.
You could be, like, I'm tough, yep. And it could also be like, you don't accept, she's so tough, which means you got to be prepared when you come to her with something. You have to have justification for wanting to do this because she doesn't accept crap.
Right.
That's how I'm going to take it.
Right. But why are you not accepting crap? Because there's a lot of freaking crap, right? There's the people saying like tone deaf and problematic things. That's hurtful to you. Like, why are you being tough? Because you have to outwardly address that with some aggressiveness or some boundary setting. Like, limiting the influence of oppression is aggressive. It's an aggressive act to say that I matter because oppression tells you that you don't. Yep. So when people are like, right, when you're in a space that is telling you that you are wrong constantly or offending you constantly, right? If you live in a space that is constantly offending you, then it can be so hard to block that out. It does take aggression because the norms of that space is one that is oppressive. And so to respond to that in a system that doesn't want to do anything differently or doesn't want to experience you differently or just wants to put you down, you're going against what the system is doing. Going against the system is an aggressive act, but you have your reasons. Your reasons are that you're hurt by the things that they say. The reasons is that you know how painful the things that they say are and how it will impact other people, right? So I personally would do more as someone who's gone through the process of training and graduate school. Personally, I would do more for myself to kind of help myself to make sure that I'm not being too bogged down by the oppressive comments of people that are surrounding me.
All right, so I'm gonna take this a little different route.
Go for it. Go for it.
So I think you did a good like self-care, like figuring out how to just be totally changing who you are route. I'm gonna say stay on top of your game. Like always be prepared so that no one can question you on the tenets of your validity, whether you know what you're talking about. Anything like that. So 1, stay prepared. 2, there's also situations where I will say limit these situations because I know it's not your job to educate everyone, but sometimes it will be necessary to educate people. For example, I had a diversity training at work. It was like on diversity and cultural competence. The audience was asked to give examples. We are in a room full of PhD, PsyD level educated mental health clinicians. We are working in Baltimore City. So these are going to be clinicians that are working with individuals and minority mental health. This woman provided an example of cultural competence by taking off her diamonds. She said diamonds plural before she goes to a certain clinic. So I could only imagine it's because she didn't want to offend the coloreds and the poor. That's what I'm gonna just assume.
I'm just shaking my head
now, and this is not like, this is a problem. A lot of people think this is something that doesn't happen in our environment. Oh, we're like educated professionals and therapeutic. Yeah, but like Justin said, we're still humans, and humans are still fallible, and we still have to challenge ourselves on some stuff that's been implicit in our lives. So it's not an example of cultural competence. It's also that's actually an example of a bias that you think that's necessary to do, that you think you're going to be judged off of that.
Right. And good therapists know how to be aware of themselves enough to admit when they've grown up with biases and prejudices and do the necessary self-work to be on the other end of that.
Definitely. And I will say this is actually not the first time I had that experience with someone talking about a diamond this year. I actually had that with another colleague, and I explained to her, if someone's going to judge you, they're going to judge you. I was like, taking off your diamonds is actually a more offensive thing. This was just because she has a huge engagement ring. It's just a more offensive thing. And if you think you're going to be judged off of that, you've already failed, in my opinion. And she appreciated that level of education. She appreciated understanding from that perspective that you're already doing a poor job. But I don't see it as you being tough. I see it as like the fact that you're just not letting stuff go by. It is necessary as someone, and I find it necessary as someone who is a mental health clinician and who has to be tends to be the only minority clinician in the room when I know you're working with minority people, because this is like where the drive is going. More minority individuals are going to therapy to educate some people. I don't want you going into a session ruining therapy for one of my like Black brothers and sisters in the room. I just don't. So you need to know some stuff. You need to know what's offensive. You need to know not to try to touch somebody's hair. You need to know that, you know, when you're doing an assessment for mental health in like children, especially Black boys, you need to actually look at anger as a manifestation of sad emotions. You need to look at that. So I also say, in that sense, I actually try really hard to make sure that I do speak out in certain situations. And I'm also known as the person who doesn't take shit when it comes to just half-assing work, because this is someone's life. Like, as someone who's done research in minority health disparities, the main reason why people don't go back to doctors is because they don't look like them and they feel like they don't understand them. And the people that you're working with are the ones getting trained, and they're going to feel like don't understand them. So don't feel bad about being tough and challenging them. That just means that you're not taking anyone's half-assing work. We work hard to get where we are. People, it takes a lot for people to go to mental health. Do you think it's your job not to understand the cultural implications, the implications of trauma and stuff on this community? No, that's not right. So it's okay to be tough. That means that they realize, like, you got to be prepped when you go to so-and-so, because you really got to have justification for that. Also, if you're in mental health and you're working on this and you have a career trajectory, I want that career trajectory to include being in a position of power. So if someone works under you, you can train people. This is why there needs to be more minorities in mental health, but also more minorities in training professions and academia. You need to be training the next people. So think of this as a challenge, so that like you'll be in a position of power where when people come out of your program, come out of your training facility, they don't have to come with this half-assness because they got trained better. Because part of this is poor training. Like, this is an issue. So be tough on it. Don't curse people out. I've worked better on being like adding more fluff when I verbally assassinate people on their stupidity, but it's still an assault. Like, it's just, there's nothing, and I'm not gonna feel bad for that. I'm not being offensive. I'm not raising my voice. I'm just stating the facts. And if you're taking offense to that, well, I mean, Sue Ann, how can you take offense to that? I didn't say anything wrong. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't snap my neck. I stated all facts that are addressed in citations. It seems like you're just offended because you're great. Just because you're offended. So just take it from that perspective. Just make sure you're always prepared. Try to sequester yourself. And I'm not saying like take a step back, but just make sure don't be screaming. Don't be snapping your neck, because that's what they expect, right? You're allowed to be emotional in certain situations. It's going to slip out because this is an emotional situation, because it's close to something that's important to you and that you worked hard to. But make sure you're coming from a point of being educated. Whenever I hear something crazy, if I got my computer, I'm like, let me look up the citation. So when I tell her she's wrong, I can tell her why she's wrong. Let me make sure that I'm not raising my voice. Let me make sure I've taken a breath. I always have to take a breath before I do have conversations like this, because they do get heated. And also, I talk mad fast, so I lose my breath anyway. But as long as you're presenting yourself appropriately, there's nothing wrong with being tough. Yeah. Like, do you want a mental health clinician who just is easily just going back and forth about stupid things? I deal with it by educating some people. Some people I do it online, like in front of people. Some people I don't. Most of the time it's online when I see people nodding and agreeing and they're all wrong. So I think y'all all need to hear this. But be mindful of it. Just don't snap. Like, I know it's hard. And you know what? Talk to your friends on the phone and snap about it later. There's nothing wrong with that.
Definitely finding your space to process it and actually be uncensored about it is so important.
Yeah, it's really just how you say it. Yeah. Just come across in a more calm manner.
I'm gonna also say this.
And get in a position of power, girl. So you can, so you're like, I'm the boss. Shut your face.
I'm gonna also say this because you're talking about like this person, right? You're talking about empathizing with tone deaf people and trying to accommodate these tone deaf people so you're not labeled as tough. In this profession, right? It's about understanding other people. Not and yourself, but understanding other people and why they are the way that they are. There's a particular type of tone. There's a particular brand of tone deafness, and I'm just going to assume that this is it. You did not say this outright, but let's just say there's racism and sexism and homophobia abound in what you're speaking to.
And right? Ageism and ability. What's the I know it's not ableism.
Ableism, yes, it's right. There's rhetoric of ism of the isms, and it is obviously offensive. We don't need to accommodate that.
And you're not wrong for not accommodating that.
And what that means is that it will be received as tough because you're not making space for them. But, and this is kind of hard. And this is where like, you're becoming a mental health professional. Yeah, it's important for you to understand other people, but that doesn't mean, but first, one, they're not your patients. And two, you don't have to accommodate things that are painful for you and that are upsetting for you.
And that are just all around stupid.
Right.
Especially for mental health professionals, like to say some stupid shit.
Yeah. And I would say the same goes for your white therapist. And again, if a therapist can, a good therapist, right, can kind of hold on to the limitations of their understanding around issues of culture for a particular person. I would say that I'm a feminist ally all day, but I also know that I will never
womanist.
Womanist, yeah, womanism, yes. That's
say you taught me that. You taught me that. So like
womanism, which was more inclusive of women of color, because feminism sometimes gets co-opted by
always that's what it's based
and perpetuates racism, but it is getting better. But I would say that I'm a feminist ally, but I would never understand the viscerally the level of cognitive burden and physical burden and emotional burden that goes into being a woman in a patriarchal society to the same degree that other women will. I will never experience it the same way, but I can understand that it's a burden and I can empathize with it and appreciate the limitations to my knowledge and be open to when a patient corrects me or suggests that there's something more or doesn't quite resonate completely with the thing I say. Maybe they're not telling me I'm completely wrong about this or that I don't get it, but it just feels a little bit off, like they're not completely saying like, yes, absolutely, that's it. I can inquire about that and be mindful of that so that I can open up the space enough so you can teach me where I may be lacking. And your therapist needs to be able to do that. If you can't be completely 100% uncensored, then that's not a good space. I would encourage you as much as you feel able to or willing to talk to your therapist and confront them about your experience of being a Black woman in their office.
And then for the second part, what are some ways you've learned to empathize and engage with the parents of your clients? Rapport building is a big thing. I always try to make them feel comfortable, learn more about them. They can always ask me questions about like me. I disclose to a certain extent with parents more than with the children, because parents just feel like they need to vibe with the person who's telling them what to do at some point. Or trying to help them rear their children at some point. Also, I always try to find the noble intention of what the parent is doing, no matter how detrimental the behavior. So I don't believe in saying something is dysfunctional, because every single behavior, as you know, as a mental health clinician, has a function. Tantrums have a function. Hugs have a function. Like everything has a function. So I try to see the noble intention of what they're doing and empathize with that, right? Like for the parent who is constantly screaming at their child to listen and cursing them out or something like that when it comes to grades, it seems like you have concerns about your child's ability to go far in life. You want them to be able to take care of themselves. It seems like that's something that's important to you. You're not manifesting it in the correct way. There's a better way to do that, but there's a fear that your child's not going to be able to go far because they're not doing well in school. School equates success. Success equates you being able to, basically get out of my house and take care of yourself. So it seems like that's the concern. Yeah. I just always try to look at the root of where their behaviors are coming from and understand that parenting is hard. Parenting is hard. Sure. Everyone is struggling with something. I always try to conceptualize in terms of learning about what they're going through and their burdens, to be mindful of what are the barriers that make it difficult sometimes for them to come see me. You may have a patient that's late a lot. Parents can be late often because they're struggling with stuff. Just thinking about that from the entire picture. I try not to leave anything out. If we have concerns about something and you feel like they're not listening to you, take a step back and say, I feel like we're kind of hitting a wall because it seems like the accommodations aren't being met. How do you feel like we're meeting goals? Do you feel like we're not meeting them? And they'll say, no, me either. Do you feel like my recommendations aren't really helpful? Do you feel like they're kind of unrealistic? If you have a parent that's struggling with so many different things and then they come back week after week and they're not doing the recommendations you're providing them, it's not all on them. Something is not clicking with them. Yeah. Maybe you're asking them to do too much. Maybe they're not at the place where they can even be doing recommendations. You're at behavioral change. They're not even motivated or engaged to participate. You just have to always take into effect every single thing that the parent is going through. And if you're able to do that, it's very easy to empathize and engage with even difficult families, because family therapy is difficult. Parents can be difficult because they're already stressed out with life and there's something going on with their child and they don't understand because they have to get an expert opinion on that. So just trying to get to the root of what's going on, be mindful. And then if you feel like you're hitting a wall, bring that into the room. Always be mindful of that. If I have a session and a parent rolled her eyes at something I said, I'm like, all right, so you're not feeling that. And I probably would say it just like that. Tell me what you think is going on. Tell me what you think is going to help your child. I'm the expert in the room on psychology. You're the expert in the room on your child. Period. I'm not going to try to take on that role. I know what I know from training. You know what you know from experience from your child. Just be mindful of the position that you're in and how sometimes, a lot of times, that can be overwhelming for parents because they may feel like someone is trying to tell them what to do about their child that they held and they raised and that was in their womb for their whole life. So, just be mindful of how it may come off. And then it gets easier. And plus, parents, everyone can joke a little bit about the fact that their child is driving them crazy. I'm like, how you doing? It's bad, huh? All right. It's a rough day.
Raising children, from what I gather, is both a labor of love and also tolerance of all sorts of unpleasant emotions.
Yes, and acknowledging that. Acknowledging that. You know what's a good way to build rapport with a parent? Be like, all right.
Acknowledge how tough it is being a parent.
Yeah. Just let's take a minute. Yeah. Let's leave, so-and-so in the lobby to play with these toys for a little bit. Tell me about what you're struggling with. You have all these jobs. You're trying to take care of this child, and then this child then calls you an asshole. Yeah, you're pissed. You could be pissed. Yeah. Tell me you're mad. I get it. We're trying to work on it together. Acknowledge the fact that, just like you said, it's hard. It's a labor of love, but the first word is labor. Dude, it's difficult.
And of course, right? It has those joyful moments, if you're fortunate, where you can really bond and connect it. But even when you're afforded those opportunities with your children, parenting is hard because relationships are hard, and the more intimate they are, the more complicated and emotion-laden they are as well.
Yeah, and then those amazing moments may be few and far between, and you may be too tired to acknowledge them or even notice when they're happening. Or your child may have struggles with manifesting those moments. So you know what? Take a minute to talk with the parent, have a parent-only session, and be like, tell me about what you're going through. I don't really think I understand. We focus on the child, but I don't think I really understand everything that you're going through. Yeah. And they just need to get it out there. They just need to have someone understand that instead of being told, but you're their mom, so you're supposed to do it, say you're their mom, and that doesn't make it any less tough.
Yes.
Align with them, because this is difficult. And if the parent is not on your side and they don't buy into something, the child's going to pick up on that and they're not going to buy into it. Just you know that parenting is difficult. I'm not a parent, but I had a parent and it's rough. I put that woman through hell for a minute. So just think back and just try to align with them, because sometimes it's hard because you're just looking at all the problems. But then a lot of times parents aren't being acknowledged for their role and how difficult stuff is for them, how hard it is to take the time to do some accommodation or work with their child when their child is really just being mean. Yes. And they're doing everything they can so that they can have their freaking new sneakers. And then they ruin the sneakers, or they say they wanted a different brand. Man, are you freaking kidding me? Yeah. Just be understanding, empathize, think about how difficult it must be for them. And then I think it's very easy to get them on your side. Because if the parent's not on your side, it doesn't matter. Because it may be therapy for the child, but the whole family is the patient. That's all I got.
I mean, I think that was great. Another mic drop.
So we did all the questions. Thank y'all so much for the questions. You guys are amazing.
Yeah, you guys are great. Thank you so much. We love answering your questions. We hope it was helpful and informative and gave you some alternative perspectives to consider.
Give us some more questions because we like answering them. We are going to go back to the Thursday episodes every Thursday. We are back from break, working on some stuff.
Yeah, got a lot of things in the crock pot.
Yeah, in the crock pots. We're doing so listen to us. You can find us anywhere you find a podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, Overcast, blah, 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 blah. Instagram, Facebook. We will be starting YouTube videos. Actually, I think next episode will be us being recorded.
Ooh, Lord.
So you're going to see some good days and you're going to see some rough days.
We're also going to be on a radio show.
Yes. Miss Margaret Live, which comes out of Minnesota. We're going to be interviewing there. And our episodes are actually in, one of our episodes will be aired every single week. So you can hear us there, but it's awesome. She's in Minnesota. Miss Margaret Sullivan. She interviews like awesome people every single week. It's live every single week, 6 p.m. Central Time. You can also catch it on the radio, and we'll put a link up so you can like click it and add them and find them on Facebook and Instagram because she has pages too.
Yeah. And
Thank you guys.
So for our listeners all the way in Minnesota or elsewhere in the Midwest, that's KFAI 90.3 Minneapolis and 106.7 St. Paul. It's going to be Friday, once a month on Fridays, I think from about 6 to 7. She's going to play an episode of ours. So I think she's playing the season 1 right now.
She's running through them. But then if you're not listening to our episode, listen to the show because the show is great.
Yeah. Do that.
All right. Thank y'all so much.
Till next time.